People think being blind is a bad thing. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. If you tell someone you're blind, they say, "I'm sorry," as if it's some great tragedy. I suppose I can't really blame them. For people with all their senses intact, I imagine the idea of living without one is unthinkable. Losing out on colors, sunsets, the blue of the ocean must seem crushing. I wouldn't really know. I've been blind since birth. I can't miss seeing, since I never really had it in the first place. I'd get a bit jealous every now and then when people would talk about something beautiful or vivid they've seen, but I got used to it. For the most part, I never thought being blind was that bad. Besides, I still had my other senses, and in some ways, I actually preferred it. I could build a pretty good mental picture of what was around me with smells and sounds and touches, even with a blanket of darkness over my eyes. In a way, the darkness was oddly comforting. It's like when you're in bed and you pull the covers over your head. It sounds silly, but it felt like I was protected. Or at least it did, until the world ended. I was listening to an audiobook when it began. Actually, I was thinking about lunch. I just happened to be listening while doing so. I had settled on grilled cheese when I heard a screech and the peal of metal bending, then tearing. There was silence, like the whole world had paused. I found myself holding my breath, straining to hear, trying to pick up on what was happening. Then the screams started. It was a cacophony that slammed into my ears like a wave. I actually stood up and stumbled away from my chair, covering my ears. My first thought was that it was as if the entire neighborhood had started screaming at once. As I uncovered my ears and began to listen again, I realized that's exactly what it was. Everyone in the neighborhood was screaming, running from something. People were shouting names, shouting to run, or just shouting. And I had no idea what to run from. Fortunately, I had James. James was my caretaker and godfather. He had been a friend of my parents, and when they left, he took me in. Raising a blind child was apparently too much of a challenge for them, but James had managed just fine. He was my parent in all but blood. He helped clean, make my meals, and make sure everything in the house remained in its place. I had a cane so I could feel around when I walked, but I preferred not to use it at home. So James made sure the house always stayed organized exactly the same way, so I always knew where everything was. At home, I could walk around as freely as if I could see. James burst into the room. "We need to go, lad," he said, taking my hand and practically dragging me down the stairs. I heard him opening the front door. "What's going on? What is everyone running from?" I heard wood splintering and glass shattering as something crushed a house near the end of the street. A house. Something just crushed a house. Something was out there wrecking the neighborhood. James pulled me through the doorway. "Ask questions when we're safe. Do not, under any circumstances, let go of my hand. Are we clear?" "James," I repeated, but James just kept pulling me. I tried to tell him I didn't have any shoes on, or even socks, but he just kept pulling me. We didn't run to the car, we just ran. James didn't even think we had time to get to the car. Knowing that, and hearing the screams and sounds of destruction around me, I was terrified. I was confused. I had no idea what was happening. For the first time, this blanket of darkness was my enemy. "James, what's happening?" I yelled, trying to be heard over the noise. "I don't know," James yelled back. "You what?" I was in disbelief. "How do you not know? What does it look like? What are you seeing?" "I don't know, lad. Just keep running." "How can you not know what you're seeing?" I pressed, my fear growing. "How can he not know? He can see. I depended on James to see. I needed him to be my eyes. How can he not know? James said nothing. I wanted to ask again, but it would be useless. If James really didn't know, asking would change nothing. All I could do was hold his hand and keep running. Eventually the cacophony faded, and I felt James slow to a walk. "Watch your step," James said. Despite, or perhaps because of the situation, I smiled. James had a habit of talking to me as if I were no different from anyone else, or maybe he made a point to do so. Either way, I was always grateful for it. He didn't treat me with any over-exaggerated sense of care, like I would shatter at the touch just because I couldn't see. I could still hear some screaming in the distance, and now I could smell smoke. "James." "Yes?" His voice kept getting closer and farther. He was looking back over and over, probably checking to see if anything was following us. "What's happening to everyone? Did something attack us?" James paused before answering. "Yes." He steered me to the left, and a pungent, acrid smell filled my nose. It smelled awful, but the closest my mind could get was excrement, and I knew this wasn't excrement. "What is that?" "Don't worry about it." I decided to listen to James, and continued my previous line of questioning. "What attacked us, James?" "Step up," James responded, helping me over what felt like a pile of rubble. "James." James didn't answer. "James, I need to know what's happening." "Trust me, lad, you don't want to know what's happening right now." "Yes, I do. How am I supposed to get through this if I don't know what's happening?" James stopped, then grabbed my shoulders. He spoke to me softly, in the same calm, fatherly tone he used when I had trouble at school or felt down about something. "You will get through this. We will get through this. I'm your eyes, remember? We'll work together. Just, for now, follow me and don't ask any questions." I took a deep breath, then nodded. We made it all of 2 steps when I heard it. Thwump, thwump, thwump. It sounded like wings? Giant wings? I cocked my head, listening. It was far off, but rapidly getting closer. Whatever it was moving fast. "James, do you hear that? It sounds like wings." James didn't respond. I imagined him scanning the sky, trying to see what I heard. Suddenly he yanked on my arm hard enough for it to hurt. "Move! Now!" I stumbled over something in front of me as James pulled me along. I heard a sound, an unearthly, blood-freezing howl that made me want to crawl out of my own skin. I felt wood under my feet as James pulled me into a building. I think it was a store of some kind, because James started steering me around all kinds of obstacles, and I smacked into something large while we were running. There was the familiar splintering sound, and flecks of wood rained down on my neck. James yelled curses and shoved me to the ground. I heard the howl again, and I curled up, my hands over my ears. I felt something settle over me, a tarp or something. Was James covering me? "James, what's going on?" "Just stay down. Don't move." "James, what is happening?" "I will take care of you, Abel." "I know, James." I heard feet thumping across wood. "James? Over here, you hideous hellspawn. Come and get me." "James!" I shouted, trying to crawl out from under the tarp. "Stay there," James yelled. "Don't you dare move, you hear me? Don't you—" More wood splintering, and a violent wind that tore the tarp away from my body. Then, silence. "James?" I said quietly, then louder. "James." Nothing. "James!" James! I shouted frantically, climbing to my feet. I held my hands out in front of me, waiting to feel James taking my arms any second, ready to guide me again. James! 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 I stumbled around, trying to find him. Somehow I found myself outside again, the cement and asphalt scraping the bottom of my feet. I tripped over something and fell, my hands landing in something wet and sticky. The acrid stench filled my nose again. I scrambled backwards, wiping my hands on my shirt. I stood up and kept walking, my hands out in front of me. I kept calling James's name, even though I didn't expect an answer. I had heard the crashing, felt the wind. I knew what it meant. Something big, had swooped down and gotten James. But I still called his name. I don't know how long I wandered, calling for James. I was in a daze, not even really trying to find him anymore. It was like my brain had turned off, putting me into autopilot. I tripped countless times, breaking my toenails and cutting myself on shards of glass and other debris. Every now and then I'd land in something wet, sticky, or both, or step in something I didn't want to identify. Once I found something I thought was water, but I wasn't sure. I scrubbed, or hoped I scrubbed, any dirt and other substances from my arms. Then I kept walking. If I heard any other howls or unearthly sounds, I didn't register it. I just kept walking. What finally pierced my daze was the singing. It washed over me like a warm bath after a long day. I found myself shuffling toward it before the thought to move my feet even entered my mind. The strange thing was, I didn't need to feel my way. I knew exactly where the song was and exactly how to get there. I stepped over obstacles that I shouldn't have known were there. I kicked aside something wet and meaty, which I somehow knew was the remains of a person. It should have bothered me. It should have bothered me a lot. Yet the song dulled even that. It shut off the fear, the pain of losing James that I hadn't even processed yet. There was just the warm serenity of the song. I was getting closer. I could hear the song clearly now. There were no words, just a melody. The voice was so beautiful. I heard something land with a thud beside me, followed by an angry hissing. The song pushed it to the edge of my perception, so far away that I barely even registered it. I kept walking toward the voice, that wonderful voice. I heard claws scrape against the asphalt, and the hissing closed in, then cut off abruptly. I heard all of this secondarily, like when you're listening to two conversations at once. I stopped. She was close now, only a few feet away. She stopped humming, her voice trailing off. I felt the softness of her hand as she brushed something out of my face, pushing aside stray hairs. I probably looked awful. At least I didn't have to see myself. "So, it's chosen you," she said. Her voice was melodic and smooth, and as she spoke, images of flowing rivers and fountains rose unbidden in my mind. I almost forgot to respond. "Chosen?" I asked dreamily. My own voice was muffled and far away, as if I was speaking through layers of cotton, or I wasn't even the one speaking at all. "Chosen," she affirmed. I could hear the smile in her voice. It was like hearing the feeling of the sun on your skin. "Chosen for what? Who chose me?" She ran her fingers through my hair, pushing out dirt and flecks of wood. I could barely hear her gentle steps as she circled me, slowly putting me back into place. "The light. The light has chosen you to be an emissary, like me." "The light." My voice was closer now, my daze once and for all clearing. "What is the light?" The light is the opposite of the dark. I was definitely missing something. Does this have anything to do with what's going on? Does this have something to do with James? Even through the effect of her song, my voice caught a bit mentioning James. Her hand cupped my cheek. Poor little one, you've lost today. She said little one the way I imagined a sage or a teacher to say it, not an indicator of age, but knowledge or experience. Somehow, when she said it, I did feel like a little one. I felt small, not in a defenseless way, but in an objective way, like she was privy to something much vaster than I had ever even bothered to comprehend. The dark is what destroyed your home, has taken your friend, and is ravaging your world. I am a servant of the light, sent to save those who hear my song. Are there other people here? I asked. I didn't hear anyone else, and it seemed like she was only talking to me. Only those the light chooses can hear my song, she replied, her voice maintaining its gentle, calming flow. You have heard my song. You have been chosen. If no others are chosen, then that is simply the way it must be. Why? Why would this light save some and not others? It didn't seem fair. Light was supposed to symbolize good, right? Why would this light choose to leave anyone to the dark, to these terrible creatures I couldn't see or even begin to picture? Mankind hates the light. The dark was a creation of mankind. They made it to destroy the light, but it turned on them. This destruction, this death, and everything else that comes is all brought on man by man. The light can save us all, but what would we learn by that? We would simply end up repeating the same mistake again. So the light settles to save some, to conquer the dark once and for all. Wait, conquer it? I have to conquer these things? I was less indignant than I would be because of that seemingly magic quality to her voice. But I was still incredulous. I'm blind. I can't even fight people, much less these things. What could your light ever expect me to do? It's not about what you can do. It's about what the light enables you to do. Enables? Is the light going to give me my sight? We will see. She laid her fingers on my forehead, and suddenly the blanket of darkness was pierced. I saw the light, and it was beautiful. More beautiful than the girl's song. More beautiful than anything I had heard, smelled, felt, or tasted. It was everything beautiful, everything good. Its beauty was terrifying, a power in itself. It burned itself into my mind, my body, and my soul. Then she took her fingers away, and the light faded, letting the darkness return. For a soul-crushing moment, I thought it would be gone forever. Then my vision exploded. That's right, my vision. I was seeing for the first time. Not in the way others see, though. I was seeing things in terms of light and dark. The girl's form shone red gold, like the glow of a campfire. The world around me, the trees, the grass, shone white-brown and white-green. There was a large object, the corpse of the monster that tried to kill me, that looked like it was made of black smoke, wisping at the edges. It lay curled like a giant snake, another portion of it a few feet away. Everything else around me glowed white, mixed with various colors, but all blanketed by a gray fog, swirling over, under, and through everything. The fog felt the same as the dead monster, another product of the dark. I looked down at my hands. The closest I can get is saying they glowed bluish-white, but to be correct, they glowed blue and white at the same time. It's not something I can properly explain, nor is it something one could ever properly picture. It just was. Whoa, was the only thing I could say. This was infinitely more incredible than anything I had ever imagined. This was much more than the sight I had been deprived of. This was true, real sight. I didn't even know what colors looked like until now, and yet I could identify each and every glow. It was mind-blowing. The girl took my hand, her glow mixing with mine. I could still see my glow through hers. It was strange, but not unpleasant. Let's go. Go? Go where? To the land of the light. We're not going to stay here. I was bursting with questions. Where was this land of the light? How would we get there? What would happen next? I settled for one question for now. What's your name? I felt rather than saw her smile. It was like a warmth passing through me. My name is Degene die zoekt. You can call me Zoe. Degene die zoekt? The pronunciation was butchered, but she had the grace not to call me out. It's Dutch for one who searches. Followers of the light are given a new name. What will my name be? I felt a warm pulse, and a white glow entered the edges of my vision. Mieru Hito, the one who sees. It was a small voice, yet this small voice resonated with a depth and power that left no doubt to whom it belonged. The light had chosen my name. All right, I said. Mieru Hito it is.